The substantive cross-cutting themes are several. We'll be talking about ideology as a mechanism by which the status quo is justified and reinforced, and therefore things like social inequalities are sustained over time. We'll have lots of examples of that. We'll also talk about some of the paradoxes or problems in the field. This is where the evidence doesn't fit the theory, or where some of the evidence is anomalous compared to the rest of the evidence. And what do? Do we revisit our theory or throw it out the window? Do we make an exception to the rule for this particular bit of evidence, etc.? I believe some of the paradoxes and the problem of the paradoxes was discussed in the core, and we'll have a chance to go into that a little bit more deeply. Again, we'll be talking in a cross-cutting way about mechanisms. What are the ways in which, the processes by which X social exposure influences Y health outcome? And we'll be very willing to embrace some of the debates in the field and disagreements with the material we'll be covering. And again, finally, a cross-cutting theme at each point will be, how do we think about this research evidence base as it relates to policy or practice? And what are the applications of it, etc.? And this, I hope, in many ways will draw on your experience. That may be particularly true for the global health students who are in the field right now working, and we'll be really eager to hear from you about where you're seeing connections and applications to your present field experience, and also for all of you on other work background you have, or how you anticipate this fitting in or being relevant to particularly a particular policy or practice environment. Okay, a word about the format. So, as you've deduced by now from the syllabus, I hope, we're running this a little bit different. It's different than most of your courses at Mailman. It's different in some ways than how I've run the class in the past. So this is sort of a new version of a change we made last year, which is to flip this class. So I hope most of the didactic material for the course, the lectures and so forth, is going to be online. So hopefully this modality you're experiencing right now isn't too painful, because you'll be getting a lot of the lecture material this way. It'll be posted in advance of our class meetings. You'll be expected to listen to the lectures prior to meeting, have time to digest them, and then in addition to doing the required reading at a minimum. And then when we meet, we're going to kind of dive into seminar mode, even with upwards of over 20 people. And we'll have a lot of different modalities for doing that. Some of it will mirror some of what you've done in ISP. Other times what we'll be doing is spending time drilling down on one or two empirical pieces. We're going to go systematically through the methods. We're going to extract from them what's the strengths and weaknesses and problems of each, the implications of how this approach was done. We're really going to engage methodologically with some of the papers and engage in some debates about the material as well. So the format requires that you have a lot of this work done in advance, including the lectures, and then we'll meet and be in heavy interactive mode. Obviously, that's not true for the online students. For you, the interactive format is going to happen virtually through asynchronous discussion fora, and there'll be more details about how that will be operationalized later. The implication of this also is that we are planning on almost all sessions to not meet for the full 3 hours allotted to us. This is because you'll already have the lectures covered before you walk into the room, and so that part, which is at least an hour, will be lopped off. And what we'll do is probably meet for about 2 hours, is my goal, with the exception of a few sessions where we will need the full 3 hours for group presentations and so forth. The TAs can answer any more details you might have about how this will work, as will I be happy to when I see you or over email. Okay, so the specific class requirements. See the syllabus for the dates for these. Obviously, an important part of the requirement for the course is class participation. That's about 15%. That accounts for readings and participation once you're in class, attendance, of course, and really engaged discussion when we meet. And again, this will be handled differently for the online students. It'll be more related to your engagement online. And it's important here to note that for the bricks and mortar students, discussion during class is important to some extent, but there are also other ways to be engaged and participate. You also can use the Canvas platform to post things in the discussion fora and that are available to the class, or respond to questions posted there. You can also have an avenue for participating offline. or online actually, not in the classroom, and that would still count towards your participation grade. The midterm exam is 20%. This is an in-class exam. It'll be about 90 minutes long. You'll have a choice of essay questions to choose from. This is a tedious, regrettable exercise in many ways because you won't have a chance to expound on all you know. It's open note. The point here is to get you to review, to re-review, to do any readings you didn't do already, and have a chance to synthesize that material and reflect on it about midway after Module 8. And so the midterm exam itself is not that interesting. The point is to give you an opportunity, or in other words, to force you to really reflect on and integrate some of the reading, all of the readings that we've covered so far, and see the connections across the modules where they exist, and synthesize and critically reflect. The group individual project is something we initiated last year, and this is basically you'll be working in groups of about 4 or 5 students. The task here is to really engage with this measurement challenge in social epidemiology. You're not doing a research project. What you're doing is choosing an X variable, an exposure variable, or an independent variable, depending on the jargon you're using at the moment, and figure out how to measure it. And so some examples of that could be neighborhood conditions, physical or social conditions in the neighborhood, aspects of microaggressions that haven't been studied yet, things related to leisure, privilege. Privilege often gets understudied because we focus mostly on disadvantage, but what about privilege? There are a lot of examples. We'll discuss many more, and we'll have an opportunity for you to think about and then contribute examples of constructs that you would like to turn into measures. There will also be, separately from this, some formal instruction from me about what this really looks like and how you should do it, how we go from a big idea and about some phenomenon we want to study and then reduce it to the measure. And you'll be working as a group to get to that final product. That final product will be an actual measure for that construct, that X variable, and it'll be circulated to all of us. We'll give you feedback. You'll present it briefly to the class and get feedback there as well. There'll be an opportunity also early on in the semester to do a very informal update for the class on what your idea is and how it's going along. Then you can get suggestions from people about what kinds of other literature and tools you might want to assess and refer to in the development of your measure. The final research paper is the largest portion of the grade. This is an opportunity for you to apply what you're learning in social epidemiology to an exposure and an outcome, any outcome that is of interest to you. If you can make this dovetail with work you already have done or is underway, or you're planning for your thesis, that's excellent. We have to work very closely together to make sure the overlap isn't too significant. And I'll talk more later about how we go about doing that. But the ideal scenario here is that you make this relevant to your work and to your interests. The format is in a mock NIH proposal aims and background section. You do not need an elaborate methods section for this. The focus here is on a critical and strategic review of the literature. You're going to identify some gap in the literature, whether it's something that hasn't been studied adequately, it's been studied insufficiently or poorly, it hasn't been studied in a particular population, or it's been largely ignored altogether. And you're going to find some gap that you can make an argument needs to be filled. And this exercise is making that proposal. It's a pitch. And so it's a strategic use of the literature to identify what the problem is, its public health significance, what the gap is and why it needs to be filled, and then how you're going to go about doing that. What would be your study that would allow this gap to be addressed? And we'll provide some examples of real-world proposals and also former student papers. And we'll provide a lot more detail about what this looks like. You also have 2 interim deadlines. One is very early on, where your first deadline for your paper topic is due to get feedback on that. Then there's an outline due later. Also an opportunity to get feedback on this before it gets too far along, too far advanced. And the more you give us, the more opportunity we have to give you some timely feedback.